Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. May the peace, love, and blessings of Allah be with you, and welcome to Ramadan Transformation. We're on day number 24. Transformation number 24. Wow, time flies. Time is flying by. Okay, so today we're looking at a really important topic, which is the solution to stress. The solution for stress. So what is stress? Well, stress is just a big word that is used to describe fear. And what happens is if you are doing one thing, but there's other things that you could be doing or think you should be doing, you're going to feel stress. So inshallah, today I'm going to share with you the solution to stress. And I think the best way to explain this is just by telling you a personal story. So recently, not recently at all, 10 years ago, I was in medical school. And while I was in medical school, most of the time during the year, I was much more interested in other things other than studying medicine. I was interested in the religion of Islam. I was interested in student politics. I was fascinated by the fact that the government was about to go to war with Iraq for no apparent reason. And I was like, oh my gosh, we can't let this happen. So I was getting involved in political activism and all this kind of stuff. And so what happened is, by the end of the year, I failed all of my exams. Right? Not because I couldn't study, not because but just because I was more interested in other things. And actually, secretly, I didn't tell anybody this, but I wanted to quit medicine because I knew it wasn't for me. Within the first half term, I knew I wanted to quit medicine. So nonetheless, I'm at university and I'm a Pakistani, and obviously my parents really would have liked me to become a doctor. But I knew it wasn't my path. But nonetheless, the summertime came and I had double resits. Now, double resits means you aren't just resitting one semester, you're resitting the entire year, 2 semesters. So it was hard enough for me to pass the exams for one semester, and I didn't pass them, but I had 2 semesters worth of exams all at once. Now, if you're in medical school, you basically need to study really hard every week. You need to make diligent notes in your class. You need to study each lesson and each topic in a lot of depth all the way through the year. And then when it comes to revision time, you should be able to just review your notes, and that'll be enough. However, if you're like me and you didn't pay any attention all the way through university, and now you've got double resits, what that means is you have 5 weeks to learn 1 year's worth of medical knowledge. That's not very much time. Nonetheless, I figured I don't want to drop out of medical school. I want to complete it and then quit. So I was like, I'm going to absolutely cane these exams. So what I did is I started studying, and I studied hard. I studied all day, every day. I woke up for Fajr in the middle of summer, so it was like 4 o'clock in the morning. I'd read Surah Yasin, and then I'd just spend the whole day studying. And I had piles and piles of notes, and I just memorized them. And these notes weren't mine, because during the year I didn't make my own notes. So I got a friend's notes, copied them out, and then memorized them all. And so I was spending literally 7, 8, 9, up to 9 or even 10 hours a day just memorizing, and then reviewing what I memorized. Really, really thoroughly. And for the first week, it's okay. It's like, alhamdulillah, I'm just going to do it, right? Second week, just all day, every day, all day, every day. Third week, every now and then I'd take a little break. I'd go out, hang out with my friends, but then I'd get straight back to it all day, every day, all day, every day. So at a certain point, probably about a week before one of the exams, the exam schedule came. See, up until then, I didn't know the exam schedule, right? And I was like, well, I'm just going to learn for the first semester and then take the first semester exam. And then I'll probably have a few weeks and I'll learn for the second semester and take the second semester exam. So when the exam timetable came, what happened was the first semester's exams and the second semester's exams were back to back. So now, even though I was being so diligent studying all of this stuff, spending all day, every day, 9 hours a day, 6 or even 7 days a week, non-stop studying, the fact that the exams were back to back meant there was very like that. That means I'd have to know everything from both semesters before sitting the first exam, because I'd only have maybe a day or so in between before the next exam for the second semester. So I was like, oh my gosh, that just doubled my workload. That means it's almost impossible. I have to memorize the whole year's worth of knowledge. I can't get away with learning semester 1, taking the exam, and then learning semester 2 and taking the exam. So at that point, I became stressed. Now, the crazy thing is, I wasn't stressed at any point before that. I wasn't stressed when I found out I failed. I was stressed when I found out when the exams were, how the exams were lined up. So now I had about a week before my exams, and this person calls me up who's a scholar and an activist. And he calls me up and he says, "Hey, we're doing this project. I want you to help out over the summer." I was like, I really want to help you, but I just can't. I can't do it. I can't help you out. And he's like, "Why not?" And I was just like, "I'm just too stressed, man." He said, "You're stressed?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he said, "What are you stressed for?" I was like, "Well, maybe you don't know, but I have resits. I have double resit exams." And he goes, "Yeah, I know you have double resit exams, but what are you stressed for?" And I said, "Well, I have to, because if I don't pass these exams, I'm going to fail." And he goes, "Okay, so what?" And he said, "Well," he said, "So what?" And I said, "Well, if I fail my exams, then you realize they're actually going to kick me out of medical school." And he said, "Oh, okay. So what?" And I was like, "Huh?" I was like, "Well, if I drop out of medical school, my parents are going to slap me. That's so what?" And he was like, "Oh, okay. Your parents are going to slap you around a little bit. Okay. So what?" I was like, "Well," and my mind went quiet for a moment. I was like, well, then I'll never become a doctor." And he said, "Okay. So what?" He said, "You won't be Dr. Mamoon, but you'll still be Mamoon." Like, so what? And I was like, well, I don't know. So what, I guess. It's like, well, then I guess I'd have to find another degree. He's like, "Okay, so you'll find another degree. So what?" And I was like, well, I guess, I don't know. And all of a sudden, my mind went really quiet. And that really tells you everything you need to know about stress. See, I'd made up a goal, I'd made up the timeline, but then I bought into this belief that my whole life depended on passing the exams. And I was acting as though my whole life depended on it. But it didn't. Whether or not I became a doctor depended on it, but my whole life didn't depend on it. And now what happened after that was really interesting, because the sheikh who I was talking to went on to say, "Your job isn't to pass your exams." I was like, Your job isn't to pass your exams? He's like, "No, your job isn't to pass your exams. Your job is to study 8, 9 hours a day. Memorize your notes. Don't do anything else. Eat as little as is needed to keep your back up straight. Sleep as little as is required for you to be refreshed enough to keep studying. But that's it. Your job is to study. Your job isn't to pass your exams." And all of a sudden, it was like, all of the stress just disappeared. Now, did my exam timetable change? No. Did I have any more time? Magically, was time created out of nowhere? No. I had the same amount of time as before, but the stress had disappeared. And you know what happened? From that moment on, my study was ibadah. Every moment of every day, I was studying really hard, harder than I was before. But now I wasn't studying because I had to pass an exam. Now I was studying because studying is worship. And every moment became precious. So, what is the solution to stress? Well, from the outside in, when you pretend that you're feeling, see, before it looked to me like my feeling of stress was coming from the exam. And while it looks to you that that your feelings are coming from the world, what happens is I was like, well, I'm stressed because I have too much to do. Well, the feeling of stress doesn't come from having too much to do, because the feeling of stress is a feeling and it changes from moment to moment. There are people who have the same amount as you to do. There are people who have far more than you to do, but they're not stressed out. So the feeling of stress can't possibly be coming from having too much to do. Rather, the feeling of stress is simply telling you, I'm not seeing things clearly. So it's not telling you I have too much to do. When you're in the outside in, when you believe the world causes your feelings, you might also think, well, I feel stressed because if I miss the deadline, then something bad will happen. If I miss the deadline, something bad will happen. Well, maybe something bad will happen, but whatever it is, it's not that bad. Whatever happens to you in the world, whether it's changing your degree or failing an exam or missing a deadline for a project or getting fired from your job or whatever happens to you in the world, that can't actually affect your feelings. Now, you've been pretending it does, but in reality, it doesn't. The reality is the inside out. The reality is feeling comes from thought. So if feeling comes from thought, and even the feeling of stress is coming from thought, then the reality is you're not feeling stressed because you have too much to do. You're not feeling stressed because you might miss the deadline. Actually, you're feeling stress. Your feeling of stress is simply telling you you're not seeing things clearly. That's why you're stressed. Your feeling of stress is telling you that you're just not seeing things clearly. You've been acting as though the world is going to cause your feelings, but the reality is it doesn't. Now, when you get the inside out paradigm, then what happens is this. Work all of a sudden becomes worship. Work becomes love. Your work, the thing that you're stressed about, that you're meant to be working towards, becomes devotion. And that is the solution to stress, to see where your feeling of stress is coming from. Is your stress coming from the world, in which case you need to fix the world in order to get rid of the feeling of stress? Or is stress telling you about the state of the world, or is stress telling you about your state of mind? The truth is, it's the latter. And the solution to stress is simply seeing that regardless of what you do in the world, that's not where the feeling of stress comes from. Your feelings don't tell you about the state of the world. They don't tell you about your state of wudu. They don't tell you about the state of the world. They don't tell you about the state of your affairs. Your feelings simply tell you about the state of your mind. The solution to stress is to realize where it's coming from, and then that's how it disappears.